Draft season is here. The first round is in the books, and we're doing a special Chris Rennie show to sort of bring you the thought processes behind some of the more mind-boggling picks, some of the fun parts of the virtual draft, and more on this episode of the Chris Rennie Show, the Chris Rennie Show Draft Special, the first round. This is your host, Chris Rennie. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Chris Rennie CFB, and don't forget to follow at Chris Rennie Show for all things the Chris Rennie Show. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Brought to you on this special Friday. I can't do this anymore. What's this guy saying? Who gave these national radio hosts these jobs? Jeez. Can't even understand that guy. What's he even talking about? I can't take it anymore. Those national media personalities making you feel like that, make a change. Listen to this idiot about the sports that matter from the opinion that matters. Haha, you said it, not me. Now for today's takes from the most opinionated host in sports talk. The first round of the NFL draft has passed, and we've got some really interesting conversation topics to talk about, obviously. The first round of the NFL draft concluded last night, past midnight Eastern Standard Time. Got 16.7 million viewers across the country, so as you can tell, the world is missing live sports. There's some interesting stories for sure. Obviously, the draft is special because you get to see a bunch of individuals live out their lifelong dreams, and this year the draft was virtual, so there was a lot of fun little things when it came to houses and the commissioner of the league and what they were doing for the draft, because Jerry Jones was on a yacht, a mega yacht, a $125 million yacht. Everyone knew it instantly. That was not a regular room. He was sitting there. And obviously the story leading up to the draft was Jerry Jones did not want anyone distracting him. For the most part, I think Jerry Jones made a good pick. The team responded, it was solid. I think CeeDee Lamb was a good fit, and we're going to talk about more of the best and worst draft picks on this episode of the Chris Rennie Show. But before we get any further into this episode, we're going to talk about the best houses. So when you go through and you rewatch the first round of the draft, or when you watch the draft tonight and you see all the coaches and the scouts, you're going to see some pretty interesting houses. All right, so the first one on my list, Bruce Arians. That man had the Florida pad down pat. He was on his porch, on the patio. It was warm out. It was fun. It was Bruce Arians just living his best life. Absolutely no questions about it. He had his nice little hat on, his glasses. He was ready to make some moves. Made a very interesting decision. I think he was distracted by the nice Florida weather. But all in all, I really did enjoy Bruce Arians' vibe. He had a sick vibe check, and there was no questions about it at all. All right, the next guy on the list was Cliff Kingsbury. If you were going to live in Scottsdale, Arizona, Cliff Kingsbury had the epitome house of Scottsdale, Arizona, the greater Phoenix area. His house was very American Psycho-esque. You would not really see that in the Southwest, really, and that's why I just was blown away. I mean, he was sitting there. His TV was way too far away from him. That's the first thing I gotta say. But the house itself, the backyard, looked insane. And then the funniest part about his house was Tyrann Mathieu tweeting, "Oh, well, that's why they weren't able to pay me." So I thought that was really funny. Jerry Jones on his mega yacht. Everyone knows Jerry Jones is rich, but the best part about Jerry Jones is most owners try to hide how rich they are. Jerry Jones does not. Jerry Jones is unapologetically himself. When you look at what Jerry Jones does, it's always with the side of flair. And when Jerry Jones was probably approached about where he was going to hold his draft viewing and his draft decision area, his draft war room, when it came to a virtual draft, there was only one option. It was his super yacht. And for anyone who's wondering what a super yacht looks like, go look it up. It is absurd. It's one of those yachts so big you could land a helicopter on it if you wanted to. It has a dive pool, so I think that's one of the pools that's connected to the ocean, but it keeps you on the boat. So that's pretty cool. It was mind-boggling how big his yacht was when I Googled it. The next guy on the list, Mike Zimmer. When you look at Mike Zimmer's home, it was the embodiment of what you'd think a rich man in Minnesota's home would look like. He had all the deer heads, he had all of the rifles, and just the wood around him. Mike Zimmer's really taken to that state, and I think the Vikings ended up having a pretty good draft. So Mike Zimmer's probably going to be living in that home quite a bit longer. I really thought he had one of the most interesting cribs on the NFL draft. So yeah, those are the best houses. And now that that's out of the way, we got to talk about Roger Goodell. Drunk Goodell was an icon. Everyone always complains about Roger Goodell not having a personality. Did he have a personality last night? Absolutely. That dude was hitting the scotch. So much so that he had a wardrobe change around pick 14 randomly. He took the suit jacket off, threw on a sweater over his nice little dress shirt. His speech got a little less clear throughout the night. And you got to think, when you're the NFL commissioner, all you have to do is read the team's name, the pick, and who the player is. The man tried to hug a player. I think it was Cesar Ruiz through the television screen. He was dancing with Jerry Jeudy on TikTok. But, everyone complains. A robot commissioner, he tried not being robotic last night. He tried making it fun. He even openly welcomed the boos. Both kinds. The fan boos and probably some really hefty scotch. Because that guy was showing more personality than anyone's ever seen. And he got made fun of. I'm not here to judge a man on the finer things in his own home. But I am here to judge what Roger Goodell was doing. It was epic seeing Roger Goodell in his own home, in the comfort of his home, still be a little awkward. That's what it's all about. That's what the virtual draft is here for. But, as you guys know, this show's about the business. We're talking best picks. We're talking worst picks right now. I'm going to go through the best picks first. We're going to get to the worst picks next. I'm going to give some reasoning behind the best picks in this NFL draft. The first best pick in the draft to me was the Browns taking Jedrick Wills Jr., Alabama, offensive tackle. A lot of people were confused because he wasn't a left tackle, but he does protect Tua Tagovailoa's blind side. So if it was a right-handed quarterback, Jedrick Wills probably would have been the left tackle for the Alabama Crimson Tide over the last couple seasons. But when you look at Jedrick Wills, he's a phenomenal athlete for his size. I personally believed it was either him or Tristan Wirfs as the best tackle in the draft. It's up for debate. I think when you look at the other two guys, Andrew Brown, he's got the lowest floor. Or Andrew Thomas, he has the lowest floor. Or the highest floor, lowest ceiling. Mekhi Becton has the highest ceiling and the lowest floor. Jedrick Wills Jr., he is a very powerful run blocker. He's very consistent in pass protection. I think him shifting to that left side on the opposite of Conklin is a really good fit for the Browns. I really do not see this being a problem. I think it's exactly what the Browns needed to do. And at 10, you get the value of arguably the best tackle in the draft. That's a winning pick. The Los Angeles Chargers made a great pick in this draft, and no, I'm not talking about Justin Herbert. I was pretty rough on Justin Herbert in my draft preview. Watching people talk about him throughout the week, rewatching some of his games, I sort of elevated my opinion on him. I think he's a very talented quarterback. Can he start doing the little things better more often? We'll see. I think he's got a year. He could learn behind Tyrod Taylor, but I do think he's going to come in and push to be a starter right away. So we'll see. We'll see. But the best pick of their draft was Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma. Kenneth Murray's an absurdly insane linebacker, and the Chargers' biggest need, I think, was the linebackers group. I think when you draft Kenneth Murray as the Chargers, it was very smart. A lot of people were disappointed they didn't get Isaiah Simmons from Clemson, but when you look at what they ended up getting, he was the best linebacker in the draft, him or Patrick Queen. I think they went with a scheme fit more, and I think when you put him with who they have, it's going to be a very nice addition. I think when you look at the Chargers as a team, their roster needed this, and Kenneth Murray really showed it at the Combine. He reminded me a lot of Devin White and Devin Bush, a little bit bigger. He made a lot of tackles for Oklahoma, and he's the first Oklahoma Sooner drafted in the first round on the defensive side of the ball in 10 years. So I'm a strong believer in Kenneth Murray, what he brings to the table for the Chargers, and I think he's one of the best picks in the draft, especially where he was drafted with that pick later in the round. So when you see what he brings, he's going to be a very versatile linebacker. He's a 3-down linebacker. That's a term I saw being thrown around a lot. Every linebacker should be a 3-down linebacker. He's going to be very active in pass coverage. He's going to be very active in the run game, and he can play inside or outside, in my opinion. So you're getting a really good player who can blitz, he can cover, he can run, stop, he can fill inside, he can be an outside run stopper. So you get a very versatile player. Not as versatile as Isaiah Simmons, but I think they wanted a more traditional linebacker with their pick. And when you take what they did, getting their quarterback with that 6th pick, and then taking that defensive stopper with their 2nd pick, I think it was actually a really smart draft by the Chargers. My next pick in the draft, Vikings, Jeff Gladney, the corner, at the end of the round. When you look at all 32 picks, when you look at where everyone landed, these players are, we didn't get the same level of preparation as fans and people covering the sport because we didn't get pro days, we didn't get all of that when the draft process was happening like it usually does. So when you look at where the Vikings ended up, they got the receiver to replace Stephon Diggs and Justin Jefferson. I think that was a pick everyone knew was going to be made. But they also got a very talented defensive back in Jeff Gladney from TCU. He was so solid in Gary Patterson's defensive scheme. He was in a lot of press man coverage. He was playing a lot of man-to-man ball in the Big 12. And he was one of the better corners in the draft. And he fits Mike Zimmer's scheme very well. And Mike Zimmer really likes physical corners, which Jeff Gladney brings. Is he the most consistent player in this draft? No, I don't think so. But when you look at Jeff Gladney, what he brings is a physical streak to him. And when you look at the Vikings corners in the past, you got guys like Xavier Rhodes, and I think he fits into that mold. And that's what I think Mike Zimmer wanted. And you look at the best teams in the NFC and the AFC, they've really maximized their defensive back room, and I think that's why this pick was really good to me. The next best pick in the draft, CeeDee Lamb to the Cowboys. I think he's the best receiver in the draft. He can play inside, he can play outside. He's big, he's fast, he's physical. CeeDee Lamb was in the news for much more than just getting picked to the Cowboys. If you don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. But what the Cowboys get in CeeDee Lamb, he fills out that receivers room for sure. Dak Prescott gets a really talented receiver, and he really fills the need the Cowboys had. When you look at who CeeDee Lamb is, he's just such a versatile receiver. He's a slot receiver. He's a deep threat. He's physical. He makes that first guy miss all the time. And that's what the Cowboys needed. They needed that elite playmaker, and when you look at the 32 players picked in this draft, it was definitely not I think he's the best. I think when you look, Ruggs was drafted before him. He was the second receiver taken. It was between him or Judy. I think when you look at what the Cowboys have, if they do with Cooper, with Gallup, you sort of have those guys. Randall Cobb was someone who needed replaced. CeeDee Lamb really fits that, and I think he's going to be a much better receiver than Cobb. Bigger, more physical, plays in the slot, inside, outside. I think with Amari Cooper, with CeeDee Lamb, who was drafted, and Michael Gallup, you've got three very versatile receivers. I think that's going to help Dak Prescott out a lot, and I think even more so it's going to help Zeke out. It's going to open up the passing game a little bit more, having that talented of a receiver on the inside. And then my final best picks, the Redskins, Raiders, Lions. You did what you had to do. Chase Young, Jeffrey Okudah, Damon Arnett, Buckeyes to the league. 2 first-round DBs for Ohio State, and Chase Young is the best player in the draft. The Redskins did not mess that up, and they're going to be set for the future. Now, smooth transition over. We're going to talk some negatives here. The worst picks, I think, in the first round, whether this be because of fit, because of scheme, because of need being met, because of where players were on the board. I think when you look at the Packers, their pick of Jordan Love has me scratching my head. You had Patrick Queen available at that pick, so linebacker was one of their biggest needs. They've been struggling at that position the last 3 or 4 years. You look at receivers, they haven't taken a skill position player in the first round since Aaron Rodgers became the starter. Yes, I know Brandon Ayuk went off the board. I know Justin Jefferson was off the board, who people were projecting to the Packers. But, you take Jordan Love at 26. 2 really solid linebackers. Jordan Brooks was behind him. You had Patrick Queen behind him. And then that's what you decided to do, was take Jordan Love. I get it if you see him being the next Aaron Rodgers, then the fit picks. He has that Favre mold, he has that Rodgers mold where they have that electric arm. But the difference is Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre were much more polished coming into the league. They were much more advanced quarterbacks. Jordan Love makes a lot of mistakes throwing the football. Can you fix those mistakes? He's going to have time to learn. But I do think he was going to fall further, Jordan Love. I don't think there was any quarterback-needy teams in this range. The Seahawks weren't taking a quarterback. The Ravens for sure weren't. The Titans weren't. The Dolphins weren't. The Vikings weren't. Chiefs weren't. You get to that second round, I don't really see any teams really jumping at the gun to draft Jordan Love. You could have gotten a much better player for much greater value, moved up in the second round for much cheaper, and then got that guy still. So it's more of, if he was your guy, I get it. But we're going to be talking about this more in the next segment. He wasn't the guy to me, period, at that pick. The next worst pick in the draft, I think Henry Ruggs, the third for the Raiders, was a reach. I think Ruggs is a great, ultra-talented athlete, but this was very Al Davis-esque. You pick the guy. He's never been the number one target. You already have a deep threat in Tyrell Williams. You have so many talented receivers in this draft. Derek Carr's not a gunslinger. I think they could have chose a route technician. I think for the Raiders, you go interior lineman on this one with Kinlaw. He was, to me, the pick the Raiders should have made. Ruggs, probably would have been there at 19. You wouldn't have got Arnett, but a lot of people had Arnett with second-round grades. So you might have been able to take that risk. Ruggs the third, though, he's fast. You can't teach what he has, and that's where it's interesting. But Darius Hayward-Bay was fast. I think Ruggs is a much more polished prospect than Darius Hayward-Bay was. But at the end of the day, what the Raiders needed wasn't a big deep threat receiver. They needed a guy who could be a 100-catch-a-year guy, and that's where I think CeeDee Lamb was the obvious choice for the Raiders at 12. You look at Jerry Jeudy, you could have even waited till the second round. You got Curse, you get Arnett. Wait till the second round, draft a guy like Michael Pittman Jr., Chase Claypool, a more well-rounded wide receiver, and that's sort of what you needed, that guy who get 80, 90 catches a year, and I don't see Ruggs being that guy. Ruggs does fit that Tyreek Hill mold where he's just an absolute beast, a burner, but what are we thinking here, You had the best interior defensive lineman in the draft. in Javon Kinlaw, and he was available. I really think the fit there was perfect. I think when you look at what Mayock and Gruden wanted in a defense lineman, he's what they needed. And then in that second round, there's a lot of receivers. It's a deep receiver draft. And if you wanted a guy like Henry Ruggs III, Denzel Mims would have been available too. So that's sort of where I got lost with the Raiders pick, and that's why Ruggs, who's a very talented player, falls in my worst picks. He was a bit of a reach. You sort of already have someone with a similar skill set, and you could have got an athletic receiver like Ruggs in the second round, or a receiver that fits what Derek Carr does more in that second round, in Michael Pittman Jr. or Chase Claypool. The Jaguars reached, period. C.J. Henderson from Florida is good, not great. When you look at complete corners, I don't see that with C.J. Henderson. His ability to make plays on the ball isn't up to the level of some of the guys who were behind him. I think from an athletic standpoint, C.J. Henderson's good, but the last corner out of Florida with the same sort of recruitment level, the talent level, was Vernon Hargreaves III, and we all saw how that turned out. Not great. So I think the Jaguars could have went a different direction. I think when you look at the corners taken in the first round, Auburn's Igbinogana, I don't know how to pronounce that name, so I apologize for even trying, but the Auburn corner the Dolphins took, better. Jeff Gladney, I think he's a better corner than him. The Dolphins had other needs, I think they could have easily, or the Jaguars had other needs. I think interior lineman was where they should have went, or offensive tackle. I think they should have taken Tristan Wirfs, Jedrick Wills, Mekhi Becton. I think that's much more what they needed. And they did not take advantage of that. And that's why I think C.J. Henderson was a reach here. Yes, I know Jalen Ramsey was gone, but I think you could have got a much better value in a corner either later in the draft or in free agency with some guys, or in a trade to add a more experienced corner. The next one, A.J. Terrell, same sort of boat as C.J. Henderson. I think Terrell's going to be a solid corner, but he had inconsistency. He was not strong attacking the football at Clemson. I think when you really want a corner, a first-round corner needs to be a guy who's elite at making plays on the football. Terrell wasn't. Terrell did have an knack for making big plays in big moments, but in the NFL, it's 16 games. You need consistency, and I don't think Terrell brought it. I think when Terrell was faced against some really talented wide receivers, he struggled. You saw those struggles against Alabama the first time around. I think when you look at what happened in those one-on-one matchups, he got beat pretty solidly against LSU. I know he had the pick 6 against Alabama, but that doesn't change the fact that throughout the game he was getting beat by Ruggs, Smith, and Judy quite a bit. The difference between Terrell and an Okudah is just that technical ability all the time, that finishing, that consistency. You're always making the play when it's at you. You're always in the right position. Terrell, on deep routes, lacked recovery speed, lacked attacking high points, lacked some of those skills you really need from an elite DB in the NFL. So A.J. Terrell, I think those were two reaches. I think they were not valued correctly. I think in this league there's going to be a lot of corners who are misses, and it's just about guessing right, and I just don't think what Terrell brings to Atlanta is what the Falcons needed there. The last one to me is the Titans' Isaiah Wilson. I think Isaiah Wilson is going to be a solid starter, but once again, this is a value thing. I think Isaiah Wilson is not the best tackle in the draft, and I think when you look at what the Titans need, it was a tackle. When you look at the rankings in the NFL draft, it's interesting to me to see him go as early as he did. I wasn't very high on him, but many people were. I think there's guys who would have fit that better. But then again, Austin Jackson went before him. I think you look at guys There's a ton of tackles that are similar skill set that you probably could have got later. You got a guy like Trey Adams. You've got guys later. Ezra Cleveland was still on the board. I was much higher on Ezra Cleveland. And then the list goes on, and that's where I think this pick was a reach. I think at 30, you could have gotten much more value at another position of need in the secondary or somewhere else for the Titans. And then again, Isaiah Wilson, good tackle, but you could have got him with that later second-round pick. So those are my best and worst from the 2020 draft so far. We're going to be doing another edition of this, but with entire drafts next week. We're going to break down the best drafts and worst drafts on the show next week, and then we're going to discuss which teams made themselves much better. So far, I really do think most teams had solid drafts. I think they drafted to need. I think Andrew Thomas was a little bit of a reach at 4, but if the Giants full-heartedly believe he's the best tackle in the draft, then I get it. When the quarterbacks, you never know. Jordan Love, question mark. We're going to get into quarterbacks in a second. But the receivers, it's about finding a guy who fits your system. The DBs, it's the same way. And these teams fully believe it. Will these players work out? It's up to them. But to me, those are the best draft picks and the worst draft picks so far. So, quarterbacks in their landing spot. When it comes to drafting quarterbacks, there are 2 questions that need to be answered before you pull the trigger on any quarterback in the NFL draft. The first one, is he our guy? When you ask that question, it's the system, it's personality, it's does he fit where we play, the landscape, does he fit Los Angeles, does he fit Miami, does he fit these places? And, a lot of these quarterbacks seem like they fit, but do they? Is he our guy? Is he going to come in and command the locker room? Is he the guy we think can develop into a Super Bowl champion? And the next, does he fit into the team? Jake Fromm is not going to play extremely well in a vertical passing offense. Justin Herbert, on the other hand, would be very effective in a passing offense that likes to attack the field vertically more than horizontally. When you look at a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, a West Coast offense is the perfect type of fit. The Patriots are trying to emulate sort of what New England does offensively, and Tua Tagovailoa is sort of in that vein of quarterback like a Tom Brady, where it's about precision, it's about accuracy, it's about putting the ball where it needs to be, attacking downfield when he can. He has that ability. If you answer those 2 questions as a general manager, then yes, you get them wherever you get them. If you have them as a second-round draft grade, you get them in the second round. No matter what, all cost. Once you start thinking teams are going to jump up and try to take them, that's when you have to make your move. But one issue I have is if you have any questions about it, that's when teams reach. And you see it all the time with quarterbacks, and sometimes there's 4 or 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round, sometimes there's 8, sometimes there's 2 or 3. Quarterbacks are not a dime a dozen. There are 32 jobs where one person plays each game. Each year, 4 or 5 teams need a new quarterback. So it is challenging. When do you start thinking about moving on from a quarterback? I don't know. The Bears are already thinking about it. Trubisky was drafted, 2 or 3 years ago? Had a lot of potential. Has he maximized it? No. Teams get enamored with potential. That's the guys like Jordan Love, Justin Herbert. Electric arms. Good personalities. What will they turn into? A short-sighted view is throwing them in right now. How do they fit into what you want to do in the future? How are you going to build a team around Justin Herbert in 4 years? See, the thing with Justin Herbert is I think they already have a roster that's very ready to win with the type of quarterback Justin Herbert is. But we're not going to spoil this topic. From a team fit perspective, this is how you grade a quarterback. And in my eyes, that includes current roster, long-term roster, offensive systems. Do the quarterbacks so far meet the criteria to be successful in the NFL? According to the GMs that drafted them, yes. Yes, they do. All right. So the first quarterback taken in this draft was Joe Burrow. What is Joe Burrow getting himself into? The Cincinnati Bengals are a franchise who have struggled. Is Joe Burrow a Andy Dalton type quarterback. I think he's got a much stronger arm than Andy Dalton. From what I've watched when I watched the two in college, I think he gets a lot more zip on those intermediate throws. So when you look at who the Bengals can draft in round 2, who's going to be the difference maker? Who do they take at 33? There's T. Higgins available. There's Michael Pittman Jr. available. There's big receivers. Denzel Mims is available. Who do they see? You need to get one more piece of help because A.J. Green's had trouble staying healthy. Tyler Boyd's a really good slot receiver in the NFL. You need that third guy. Offensive line-wise, their O-line was one of the most mediocre to below average offensive lines. They have struggles on defense, so they're going to have to rebuild that as well. So Joe Burrow's projection is a little harder. I think he fits Cincinnati. He's a southeastern Ohio kid. Cincinnati, that's where he's at. Southern Ohio, and that's important. Joe Burrow knows what it means to these Bengals fans. He's grown up in the area. That's important. He has talent that can definitely raise the expectation of the franchise. That's what he did at LSU, and that's what he has to do in Cincinnati. He's going to struggle this year. I think that's not even going to be a question. I think what Zach Taylor wants to do offensively, I think it really fits Joe Burrow's skill set. How is he going to take to coaching? He's a coach's kid. I think he's going to take very well to it. They have a really good running back in Joe Mixon and Giovanni Bernard. A good tandem back there. So I think he's got a pretty nice set of weapons. I think he's a guy who makes quick decisions. He's not going to hold on to failures very long. So I think that's what you need in Cincinnati. I think it's a really good fit. Tua Tagovailoa got drafted to the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins have been looking for their quarterback of the future since Dan Marino left. All right, and they haven't found it. The closest they got was Ryan Tannehill, who is now on the Tennessee Titans. Tua is going to be a good, productive pro. Yes, I know the injuries, but we're going to avoid that in this conversation because we really need to just look at this holistically. The reason I liked Tua when it was the Chargers as his option was because he would be able to sit a year behind Tyrod Taylor, ensure he's fully healthy. The Dolphins don't offer that. They have Ryan Fitzpatrick. They have Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen wants to become a starter in the National Football League. Is he capable? I think he's going to be moved today in this draft. On day 2 of this draft in the second or third round, I think you're going to see a trade happen with Josh Rosen included in it for the Dolphins to move around. And that, to me, is going to be what happens there. And they're going to let Ryan Fitzpatrick lead the way. But if Tua is healthy, he's going to beat Ryan Fitzpatrick out. I really believe that. I think the Dolphins improved a lot under Brian Flores with their young defense last year. So I think that side of the ball is going to continue to get better. Look to them to add to that today and tomorrow. But the Dolphins, they have very limited receivers. I think Devontae Parker is very good. But besides that, Allen Hurns, all right. They've got Ricardo Lewis. Looking at the current depth chart, I don't know if it's updated or not. Devontae Parker, Preston Williams, Allen Hurns, Jakeem Grant, Ricardo Lewis, Mac Hollins, Albert Wilson, Isaiah Ford, Scary Jennings. Not a lot of exciting names. I like Mike Gesicki, Eric Flowers at guard, Ted Karras, Jack Calhoun. Not sure how that's going to hold up on the inside. They made a move for Jordan Howard. Kalen Ballage was a pretty solid player when he was healthy, as well as Myles Gaskins, but they don't really have anything special on this team right now. That's where the issue is. Defensively, I really think they are going to be a really good team next year. They have a 4-3 defensive front. I think their linebacking group, I'd put up with anybody in the league. You've got Shaq Lawson, Jerome Baker, Kyle Van Noy. Long term, I do think if you add those offensive weapons in this next round, I think if you could get a guy like J.K. Dobbins, if you can get a guy like Michael Pittman Jr. at wide receiver to get a nice definitive number 2 receiver with Devontae Parker, this team's looking up. I really do believe that. I think what Brian Flores is doing here with his general manager is very positive, and I think Tua's a very stable passer. He's not going to make too many mistakes. He's not really a gunslinger. He's going to make the right decision, and he's a very quick processor of the game, and that's what Miami needs while they're building their offensive lineup. They needed a super tough guy or a guy who's going to process and make quick decisions. Ryan Fitzpatrick, super tough. Take this year. Tua's got the ropes to learn on. They're going to continue to solidify their roster, and boom. I think this was a good pick. Justin Herbert, Los Angeles Chargers. Justin Herbert is a guy who I wasn't the highest on. I think this draft worked out the way I thought it would, though. It was much higher on Justin Herbert than Jordan Love in Green Bay. Not Jordan Love in Green Bay, Jordan Love out of school. I think Herbert, so the last 4 days after I released my podcast on Monday, he was the most talked about guy in my opinion. He had so many good things said about him. It was positive all the time when it came to him. And you look into that more and more, and I just really am excited to see what he's going to do in Los Angeles. They've got Tyrod Taylor. I think he's going to come in and push right away. They've got Mike Williams. They've got Keenan Allen. They're loaded at receiver. They've got a really good running back in Austin Eckler. I'm really high on what the Chargers did. I think they got better with Herbert. I think he's a guy who has an extremely great amount of upside, and that to me just is what the Chargers needed here, especially with an incumbent in Tyrod Taylor, who's been a consummate professional. He is now the bridge QB. He's similar to Ryan Fitzpatrick. Teams are going to bring him in because they know exactly what they're going to get from him. He can win you games. He's not going to embarrass you if you put him out there. And he's just going to teach these quarterbacks the ropes. And then Herbert's going to come in. He's going to take the job. I think he's got the arm to be a 30-touchdown guy in this league. I always think he's going to have 12 to 13 interceptions a year, though. And I think talent-wise, he is potentially going to be an upper echelon quarterback. I think his career is going to hang out in that middle tier, so it's going to be very much about building around him and just continuing to keep weapons around him, because the better the weapons you have, the easier it is for him to make those decisions. And right now he's got two of the best in Williams and Keenan Allen. The last quarterback drafted in the first round, Jordan Love to the Green Bay Packers. Everyone is saying that this is going to be a Favre Rodgers situation, but for those of you who can't think back that far, how much did Brett Favre hate having Aaron Rodgers there? Aaron Rodgers was smug. He was always trying to outsmart Brett and all that. I don't think Jordan Love's going to be doing that to Aaron Rodgers, but I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to be happy about this decision. The more I thought about it overnight, Packers fans were a little excited to have a really good backup quarterback, but at 26, it was such a reach. I think it's early. I think there's going to be gunslingers next year. I think there's going to be gunslingers the year after. I think there's going to be a ton of quarterbacks in the time moving forward till Rodgers retires at around 40 to get a guy with a similar skill set and build on what he is. I think Jordan Love, from what I've heard, is one of the nicest guys, but I don't think he's going to come in and ruffle any feathers. I think he understands who he is as a player. Long term, I think Jordan Love can be a nice replacement to Aaron Rodgers, but the way this league works, Aaron Rodgers has always been very defensive, and he's always wanted a choice in who's behind him, and it was Matt Flynn for a while. It's always been a guy who wasn't as talented as Rodgers. I think he was comfortable with Deshaun Kaiser back there. I think now the Packers are thinking about what's next, which is smart by the Packers, but Aaron Rodgers does not believe that this is ending anytime soon, so I do think it rubbed him the wrong way. From a fit standpoint, I don't think he fits right now. I think the Green Bay Packers, who haven't drafted a skill player for Aaron Rodgers in the first round since he became the starter, needed to add another quarterback. I really did not see that needing to be done. I don't want to talk bad about Jordan Love, but I wasn't very high on him as a prospect, and I was very confused about what Green Bay was doing. So we'll be keeping you guys updated on the NFL draft throughout, go check out my blog Without Winners. We're going to be doing a nice piece Sunday about the best and worst drafts, and then I'm going to bring more detail to that on my show Monday. It's been interesting seeing how teams have reacted to their picks. It's been interesting to sort of see this draft unfold without fans. There's 9 on the screen at a time when a draft pick's made, so we'll see how that continues to go. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChrisRennieCFB, and don't forget to subscribe and rate to the show. Subscribe and rate the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast and rate the podcast. God, I'm getting all tongue-tied. But this was a strictly business draft special. My voice sounds a little different because I got to be a little quiet because of reasons. But the houses were sick. I think a lot of teams got players that fit what they wanted to do. And I really do think there were very few mistakes made. But as always, 5 years from now, we'll see the results. Thank you for listening. Adios.